our next speaker has been writing for The Fool since 2000. And when in 2011 she openly questioned Warren Buffett's sexuality, he invited her to brunch. LouAnn Lofton is the author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Warren Buffett Invests Like a Girl, and Why You Should Too. Please welcome LouAnn.
Thank all of you so much for coming out, braving the cold, being here. We're so excited all of you are here. So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is just tell you a little bit about, can everyone hear me? I feel like I'm really loud. Is it good? Is it okay? Okay. A little bit about my story, how I ended up here, how I came to be an investor, and then talk a little bit about the book and the tenets about women and investing that so many of you are obviously excited about and we're happy you're here for. So how did a girl who was a tomboy in a 3-stoplight town in Mississippi grow up to take that picture? That is unbelievable. And this is a different dress, by the way. I know they're both gray, but they are. You can't see the neckline good on that one, but they're different. Let me clear that up. Hair the same, different dress. So growing up, I grew up in a really small town. My dad was a pharmacist. My mom's a writer. I didn't grow up learning about investing. We didn't talk about investing. It wasn't something our household, sat down and did together. So I had really no clue about any of that stuff. However, my father passed away suddenly when I was 14, almost 15. And despite my kind of idyllic childhood and growing up in a place where it was incredibly safe and you could go out, in the summer, leave your house in the morning and ride your bike all day and no one missed you until you were home, that experience of him passing away suddenly was just obviously life-altering and showed me, hey, you have to be ready for anything. Life can change in an instant. And the weird thing was that very thing was what led me to this picture, as I'll get to. So I knew, after I graduated high school, I knew that I would be inheriting a little money, not a lot of money, not enough to just sit back and do nothing for the rest of my life, but a little because of my father's death. And I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want to do the wrong thing with that money. I knew I'd be 21 when I got it. And we all know, no offense, 21-year-olds and those younger, but we all know at 21 it's very easy to be impulsive and spend the money, and I really didn't want to do that. I really didn't want to disappoint him. So I said, I'm going to learn about investing. I was a couple years out of high school. I was living in Austin, Texas, and I just decided to figure it out on my own. I didn't trust anyone else to do it for me. I didn't want to just turn the money over to anyone. So I started reading everything I could get my hands on. And I read, about technical analysis and about day trading, and you name it, I read about it. Then I stumbled upon this book by this guy, Andy Kilpatrick. And it was a biography of this person, Warren Buffett, who at that point I'd never heard of. This was before Buffett's. He was famous then, but not like famous now. And so I'd never heard of Buffett. And in reading about what he does, I really connected with his story. He's just a small town guy, independent thinker, lives below his means. But more importantly than kind of his personal story, I really connected with how he invests. Buffett buys great companies that he can understand, and he plans to hold on to them forever. He owns shares of Coca-Cola since the 1970s, which he actually bought his first shares in that year I was born. So I liked that. He owns Dairy Queen outright, which is where I had my birthday party in the 5th grade. We didn't have the McDonald's. That's how small the town was in Mississippi. You had to drive the next town over, and then it was a Dairy Queen, which was delicious, so I'm not complaining. But he owned, candy shops, furniture companies, Geico, Fruit of the Loom underwear. Things that I at least understood. And this made so much sense to me that you could invest this way and end up with the results that he did. So from that point on, I really was a Buffett fan. I was a devotee. Anything Buffett was A-okay in my book. And I certainly never imagined at that point that I would be writing a book about him and meeting him someday. So a few years after that, I'm in a bookstore and I see a book with these two goofballs on the cover in jester caps. And it was in the investing section, and I thought, how strange, but how wonderful. So I read the book, The Motley Fool Investment Guide, loved it. I remember there was a copy of, I think, Fortune magazine, and Tom and David were on the cover of it in their caps, and it was so cute. I tore the cover out, put it on my fridge. I just loved The Motley Fool. I love that we stood up for the little guy, that we believe that everyone has the power to control their financial future, that we don't have to turn our money over to somebody. We don't have to, find some guy that you might or might not be able to trust. And so the Fool, much like Buffett, it really spoke to me, kind of what the Fool stood for. And I want to say to David, just based on what he just said, I have held Starbucks since 1998. So thanks. I appreciate that. So I started here as a writer in January of 2000, and did as the Fool. I mean, it's such a great place to work. You're always challenged. You can always do 1,000 different jobs, and grow and learn, and so did many different things in the editorial organization. And in the summer of 2007, we started noticing that these studies had come out for a while about the differences between how men invest and how women invest. And we were talking about them around the office, and people in our community talking about them. And, it was just really some interesting things. In looking at those studies, it really seemed to me that the difference between how men invest in general and looking at how women invest in general, I was struck by what just seemed to me to be very kind of Buffett-like temperament in women. No one had really ever talked about this. No one had addressed it or recognized it as a positive, encouraging way that women, that we make great long-term investors. I felt like this was a message that wasn't getting out there at all. And Warren Buffett Invests Like a Girl was born. So what does it mean to invest like a girl? Well, in my book, I looked at research going back over 10 years. And studies show that women tend to be patient rather than impulsive, realistic rather than overconfident, and prudent rather than reckless. We tend to think longer term, take much less risk, and we just generally view investing less as a game or a competition than men do. For women, it's really about the means to the end. It's having the long-term point of view. It's having security for your family. It's saving so that your child, as Allison was saying, can go to college. There are these very broad kind of long-term things that help us be patient versus most men. So, true. We do more research. We ask more questions. We trade a lot less. Kind of the seminal study in this came out in 2001. It was called Boys Will Be Boys. And it showed that men traded 45% more than women, and single men traded 67% more than most women. So I think we're a good influence. That's all I'm saying. And we don't tend to look at investing as a kind of macho scorekeeping system like a lot of men do. One very important trait that comes up again and again is this idea of overconfidence. And studies show that men just tend to be more overconfident than women. Simply put, they think they know more than they do. Ladies, have you ever been in a car with a man who won't stop to ask for directions? That's overconfidence. In investing, this plays out when you buy stock in companies that you know nothing about, that you don't understand, which again, going back to Buffett, is exactly the opposite of what Buffett does. You'd be amazed, though, how often this happens. I mean, hot stock tips, people are always asking. It's funny when I speak to groups of women, they ask such intelligent, kind of thoughtful questions, and inevitably, I'm sure it won't happen now that I've said this, but I'll get some man will just be like, yeah, what's the hot stock right now? What's the hot stock? Give me the ticker symbol. It doesn't matter what they do. And this calm and patient demeanor results in outperformance as well. One recent study showed that female hedge fund managers have outperformed their male counterparts by 55% over the last 9 years, yet only 3% of hedge funds are run by women. So I would encourage all of you out there, trying to figure out what it is you're going to do with your life, open a hedge fund. I'm just kidding. But there is something, and hedge funds are being run in a very feminine way by these ladies. So our investing temperament is shared by the greatest investor the world's ever seen, Warren Buffett. And what's more, Buffett has always said that it's temperament and not intellect that will make you a great long-term investor. It's the ability to manage your emotions, to not let yourself do things that get other people in trouble, And you actually don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In some cases, that can work against you. If you've read about long-term capital management, the colossal hedge fund failure, they had Nobel Prize winners on there doing their quants, and it didn't work out. So a couple of benefits of investing like girls. There's one, I would say, the top-down view. If we go back to 2008 and we look at what happened there, rampant risk-taking, over-leveraging ruled the day, and there were next to no women in positions of power or on the trading floors of the companies that would run the world economy off its tracks. Now, I'm not suggesting we can ever fully eliminate market booms and busts. However, there's evidence to suggest had more women been in influential positions throughout Wall Street and other financial firms and hubs, the recklessness leading up to the crash and the crash itself might have been much less pronounced. In fact, one study I cite in the book talks about the role of testosterone in our financial markets. It doesn't surprise you that it has one, right? Testosterone makes groups of men do weird things. It feeds on it, and it makes them take more risk than is necessary in an attempt to assert dominance over one another. But the authors of this study, they looked at what testosterone causes and causes traders to take more risk and continually take more risk. I mean, the more money they were losing, the more risk they were taking because they were just in a competition with the guy next to them. Those studies, the authors of that study, had an interesting conclusion. Adding more women to the trading floors and boardrooms of financial companies would have a nice mitigating effect and would, quote, help dampen the hormonal swings in the market. Their words, not mine. So from the top down, it seems like having more women involved in our markets and convincing men to get in touch with their feminine side will be a good thing, but it's also good on an individual level. I cite one study from Vanguard that looked at 2.7 million IRA accounts and the activity in them during the market panic of the fall of 2008 and 2009. And what they found was very interesting. Women were much more likely than men to remain calm and not panic, to stay the course. Men, on the other hand, were more likely to react to the markets plummeting by panicking and selling their stocks at the worst possible time, locking in huge losses and ensuring they'd miss out on any gains when the market eventually did turn around. Having this ability to remain calm and tune out the noise is critical to being a great long-term investor. You got to be able to stick with it and ideally adapt Buffett's famous saying, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others were greedy. Fall of 2008 was a great time to be greedy and buy stocks of companies you liked at even better prices. It is incredibly hard to control your emotions. That's something as a long-term investor I'm still figuring out. I think that's a lifelong thing for all of us. But in order to be great, you got to learn to do it. And I'll just say, luckily, ladies, we have a head start. Finally, to explain this picture, I'll just say we sent Buffett a copy of the book. Well, he didn't know we were writing it. And people would ask me when they would hear what I titled this book, does Buffett know what you're saying about him? Does he know? And I would always just say, no. But, he's got a sense of humor, and he'll take it as a compliment. He'll know that I mean it as a good thing. And so we sent him a galley copy when we got it and nervously waited. And I'm not joking, within like 12 hours, maybe even less, of him getting the book. And of course we know this because we were obsessively tracking it via UPS. I heard from his people. If you know about him, he doesn't do email, but I heard from his assistant that said, Mr. Buffett got your book. And he had written a little handwritten note, which she had to scan in and attach to the email, because that's how little technology he does. But the note was so sweet and just said something like, I got your book and I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm hosting a little brunch out in Omaha. Why don't you come? No big deal. And I screamed so loud that I had a friend over at my house, and he was like, who died? Oh my God, somebody has, I just was in shock. I couldn't believe it. So I hear from him then the next day. He read the book that very night. They contact me again. He does another little handwritten thing that says, I know, it's hysterical. Trust me, these are in a fireproof box, under my bed. So they contact me again, and his little note says something like, I read your book last night. I really enjoyed it. I think you've got me pegged. Looking forward to meeting you at brunch. Come up and say hello. I'll be the guy with white hair. Y'all, there were a lot of guys with white hair there. But I knew that one. So I show up at the brunch, shaking, alone, nervous. They do not have a name tag for me, which was very upsetting because mine just looked all janky and like written, and everybody else had these very fancy printed name tags. So that made me sad. But when I got in, I was too scared to talk to anybody. I looked over, and it's like Glenn Close is over there, Billie Jean King, Jane, all these people within Berkshire too that I've read about for years, having been a Berkshire shareholder. And I was just nervous as could be. And finally I thought, well, this is my time. Like I have to go. I have to go now. He's sitting with his family. Oh, this was the best part too. I was looking for Buffett. And I look over, and he's just sitting there eating. That's how nobody else there was floored like me. He had somehow just snuck in and sat down with his sisters and was eating brunch. So I went over, I waited for him to be done. I mean, I'm not rude, people. And went over and just tapped him on the shoulder. And when he looked up, just said, Mr. Buffett, my name's LouAnn Lofton. And I said, you invest like a girl. And he was so sweet. He stood up and gave me a big hug and was just, all the stuff you hear about Buffett is true. I mean, the guy is the real deal. He's funny, he's humble, he's down to earth, he was laughing, he was like telling everyone around, oh, this book that she wrote. And he said, because this was the day after the annual meeting out in Omaha, he said, I should have come out and drag yesterday. I could have sold you a lot of books. I said, yeah, you should have. So it was amazing. It's still just the most surreal day of my entire life. And they were all so charming. And I met his two sisters, the entire family. They're just great, great people. And to close, I'll just say one final thing, which is get your kids started early investing. Get your daughters, get your nieces, get the neighbors' kids, get everyone. We have Maya here, who's 12 years old, who I'm so excited that she and her dad were able to come in for this event. And she is, I think this is the next Buffett sitting right over here, I'm telling you, she's on her way. The earlier you get started, the better. And thank you all again so much for coming tonight. We're so excited you're here. Can't wait to talk to all of you, hopefully, after. Thank you.